So yesterday we have seen about the HTAP, that is hybrid transaction analytical processing link. Okay, how we can connect to Azure Cosmos DB, right? So as part of Lambda architecture, okay, so we are able to get the data from a Cosmos container, okay, without disturbing its transactional store, because for every transactional store it enables or it creates an associated analytical store, right? So with the help of within the Synapse, you can directly query the data from the Cosmos container, right? And so which will query the data from the analytical store, right? That's what I said yesterday. So let's open Synapse Studio, and meanwhile it happens, let me go here, and here Azure Cosmos DB, right? So we have this containers. So where is the containers we have? Yeah, this is a Cosmos DB account, and we can go over Data Explorer, right? Document Explorer, we can see. So here is the Data Explorer we have. So where we can query the data, right? And as I said, while creating the container, you can enable that HTAP link, right? And if you remember yesterday, while creating this clothing, I enabled the HTAP link over here, right? So I'll go here the data, right? So what I will do is I'll create a link for that. Okay, I did already yesterday, but I will, can I delete? So let me delete this, otherwise, yeah, let me show you that. So what I will do, so I'll create a link for this. Like if you remember, you can create the link for all like data sets, or you can create a link for ADLS within the Synapse, right? So same way you can create a link for Cosmos DB. So I'll create a connect external data. So what do we have here? Blob storage, Cosmos Mongo API, Cosmos SQL API, Gen2, Azure Data Explorer. So I have here Cosmos DB SQL API, right? Because I created an account of Cosmos DB with SQL API. So I select this, continue, right? Cosmos links here. And I'll say from Azure subscription, free trial. So this is a Cosmos account which I have, and here the database name is product. Database in the sense here the container, right? So I selected that. Now create. Right? It's created. Now we created a link for that, right? Now so refresh. Now this is the one which I created here, Cosmos link, right? So whenever I query the data over here, you can see all the data. Now whenever I can directly now query the data by using the notebook, right? Data frame to container, load streaming data from container, write streaming data from container. So directly I can load the data, right? So okay, here I don't have any Spark pool, but I can create a Spark pool. So here you don't need to write anything, right? So 3.1. So 3.1 is the one latest version. So which takes care of the reading the data. So it reads the data as stream and the format. So if you remember, the syntax for reading the data is Spark dot read streaming is for streaming, and read the file is read, right? And the format Cosmos DB, and these are all various properties, and Cosmos container and change feed. because it goes on get the change feed. So whenever you keep on adding the data, right? So all the data will be coming from beginning to incremental, and directly you will load the data into the data frame stream, and that you can display the data or you can perform all analytics on top of this data frame stream. Okay, so if you remember, I was saying that, so it's more to do with the streaming kind of data, right? So it as the data is coming into your container, the actual container, the data will be the data will be invoked, or the data will be updated in the analytical store data, right? So analytical store data will have always the latest data, so which you which keep on increments, like you have the streaming in your Databricks, and at any point of time you can always get the latest data from that stream, right? So that's all about the HTAP link, which you need to understand from exam point of view. All right. And here you can, like if that is like we have so many various queries you can practice. I'll give the link, so where you can like all the JSON data is there, right? Within the items, so you can query the items with the help of this SQL queries and all, right? That's about the HTAP link, which I wanted to discuss quickly. And let's talk about the security, which is important. So we'll quickly go through some of the security concepts, and the next session we'll try to implement one by one and show you that. Okay, now for today I will run you through some of the theoretical one which you need to understand from the exam point of view, right? So as I was saying, the exam is mostly concerned or connected with the Synapse Analytics. Okay, so security means you will try to ask the questions related to security with the Synapse Analytics, right? And like pipelines, Synapse pipelines, right? So the whole exam is centric towards Synapse Analytics, right? Now here, even the security also, the majority of the portion will be around Synapse Analytics, but the concepts can be implemented to any Azure resources, right? But we will discuss all those stuff in general, so that you'll get an idea. And most of the things you might already know and you might already working that, but we'll try to revisit them to get an idea from exam point of view, even from the like your real-time point of view, right? So in the next session we'll try to create those things quickly, like it doesn't take like more than 20-30 minutes. Then we'll see that, and even in the next session itself we'll see even the Git also. So I'll try to install a Visual Studio and Git in this laptop because it formatted recently. So there we will try to see how the branching and everything happens in the data factory, right? That we will see in the next session. So with that, almost everything will be done, right? So what I'm planning is, okay, I'll stop the recording at the end. I'll talk about that, right? Now, coming to security, coming back to security. So Azure Synapse can be secured by various things, right? So one is the firewall rules, one is the virtual networks, one is the private endpoints, right? So these are the three things through which usually you can like secured Azure Synapse. Okay, so what is firewall rules? You know that, right? Firewall rules enables you to define the type of traffic that is allowed or denied access to on Azure Synapse Workspace using originating IP address of the client that is trying to access Azure Synapse Workspace. Okay, so basically it restricts or it allows the access only from specified IP address, right? If you remember that, so earlier I was like when I creating the SQL server, right? So I was trying to add, I was checking that firewall rule, and I was trying to add only some of the IP from my system so that I can access that, right? That's what I was talking about. So we using IP firewall rules, you can control all the like IPs which needs to get access, right? So that I was showing here. So here you can see here. So Synapse Workspace, show firewall settings, right here, client type and all. I can see, say suppose you don't have any client. So here I'm trying to allow all the like allow all, because I'm not restricting anything. I did not check that box allow, like did check the box like allow all from the all IPs by creating that. Okay, otherwise what you do, you just add client IP. So that, so what happens, my client IP is this one, so it will add. Otherwise you want to add some IPs, okay, which needs to get access to this. So we'll add some access, like I can say IP. Okay, so then I will add that IP, whatever the IP is there, then that will be that particular IP will have the access. Then I will save it. Okay, that's what that's how with the IP I can like restrict the access, right? So that's about the firewall rules. Now, virtual networks. Azure Virtual Network enables private network in Azure. So virtual network, what happens? So if you have private networks, okay, you can enable them so that only those networks will be able to access the Azure resources, right? So Azure resources can be anything, right? Synapse Analytics or anything. In this particular case, I'm talking about Synapse Analytics. Okay, so VNet enables many types of Azure resources such as Synapse Analytics to securely communicate with other virtual networks, the internet or on-premise network. Okay, so when you enable VNet for Azure Synapse Analytics, okay, so what happens? It can secure it. It will communicate with other virtual networks or on-premise network with more security, right? So you can enable, you can create VNet, like when you're creating like when you're creating Synapse, right? You can enable the VNet only, so those specified network will be able to communicate that. Okay, VNet enables many types of Azure resources such as Synapse Analytics to say, okay, I just copy paste the problem. So that, one second. Right, so basically with the help of VNet you can enable the communication with other virtual networks, right? Now the last thing is private endpoints. So enables to connect to up to various components through endpoint. You can set up manage a private endpoint to access these components in a secure manner known as private links. Can be achieved by managed workspace virtual network. Okay, so with the help of so these are called private links. Okay, so you can enable connected to only some of the components with the help of private endpoints. Okay, so these private endpoints will be done with the help of the managed workspace. Okay, so that's how you manage all the security. So in the real time, usually we will go for the VNets. Okay, for every resource, whatever resource we have, so we create the like virtual networks. So initially you don't need to worry about that, because in there will be separate infra team which takes care of these virtual networks. So they will create VNets, like when they, what do you say, when they design the security mechanism, so they will design VNet for some of the resources, right? And accordingly they will enable the virtual networks for those resources, right? So that's how these are the three things which helps to secure the Azure Synapse, right? And network security. So within the network security, we have so many things, right? So Azure internally has internally provides the security mechanism so that only authorized people will access that. Okay, securing your network from attacks and unauthorized access, important part of any architecture, right? So basically, like in any architecture, whether it's particular to Azure or on-premise, anything, so you should have ability to like safeguard your network from unauthorized access, right? So we have various things like internet protection, firewalls, device protection, network security groups. With the help of these three things, it helps to protect your network. Okay, so what is internet protection? assess the resources that are internet facing, and to only allow inbound and outbound communication wherever necessary. Make sure you identify all resources that are allowing inbound network traffic of any type. Okay, so what is trying to say is, so whatever the resources that are trying to that should access your resources, okay, identify that and make sure that only those resources will have the access. Okay, so that's called internet protection. And firewall, to provide inbound protection at the perimeter, there are several choices. Okay, so in the previous example, I was saying that what is firewall rules, right? So with the help of firewall rules, right? So you restrict the access only to specified networks, right? And internally, the Azure also provides DDoS protection, that is distributed denial of resource services. Okay, so whatever the security, like whatever services you are creating, whether Synapse Analytics or SQL Server or any resources, I can say, okay, for any resources, Azure internally has DDoS protection so that only authorized users can access those networks. Right? And apart from that, we have NSG, Network Security Group. Okay, so it allows to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources, and NSG can contain multiple inbound and output secretors. So security group is there, right? So within the NSG, what happens? You provide all the security rules. Okay, so using security rules, only authorized like access will be done on your resource. So the resource can be any. So these are the four high level points which Azure provides to secure your network. And identity and access. So you know that, right? So whenever you're trying to access a resource, so you should have the proper authorization and authentication. Right? So it's a basic terminology which we are keep on hearing from your on-premise times. So what is authentication? So the process of establishing the identity of a person or service looking to access the resources, right? So what is authentication? So whenever you're trying to access a resource, okay, so we need to make sure that the person or resource is have complete permission to access that particular resources. Okay, that talks about the authentication. So authentication is validating a person, okay, saying that he has enough permission to access a resource. That's about the authentication. It is even like general terminology, right? Authentication is a general terminology, even irrespective of a on-premise or cloud, right? And what is authorization? So when you have access on particular resource, okay, then what type of access you have on that resources? Okay, that talks about the authorization. Okay, so this is a process of establishing what level of access an authenticated person or service has. It specifies what data they are allowed to access and what they can do with it. Azure Active Directory also provides this capability. Okay, so say suppose you have like a SQL Server. Okay, so authentication says that, okay, whether you it validates whether you have the access on that particular SQL Server, right? But what authorization says, when you have the access to that particular resource, okay, what kind of data you can access, what kind of table you can access, and at what level you have. Say suppose you have like some access on like you have authorization on couple of tables, okay, even within the couple of tables, okay, whether you have select permission or delete permission or what do you say, modify update permission. Okay, so what kind of level you have? Okay, at high level, that talks about authentication and authorization. Okay, and authentication, we have Azure Active Directory, okay, which is one of the good feature within Azure. So within once we have Active Directory access, all the resources, right, all the resources you can access with single sign-on. Say suppose I have created some of the resources within my Azure account. What I can do, simply I can access all the resources without any issue because of my like AAD feature, right? So it has single sign-on, enables users to remember only one ID and one password to access multiple applications. That's what I'm saying, right? So suppose you created Synapse Analytics, right? So with the same single sign-on, okay, you can access that Synapse Analytics. Okay, even say suppose you have ADF. So with the same single sign-on, without entering details again and again. Okay, so you can access the same resources. And apps and device management. You can manage your cloud and on-premise apps and devices to access your organization resources, right? So if whatever the resources that you have, like whether cloud or on-premise, with the help of with the help of AAD, you can access it, right? Say suppose single sign-on, the best example was a Databricks. Even though Databricks was in separate entity, okay, separate resources, okay, I'm able to access the Databricks with single sign-on. So it takes the validation or authentication happens from the Azure Active Directory premises itself, and with the help of that, I can directly access the Azure Databricks. And entity service, manage business to business entity service and business to customer entity service. Even you have like a web application, you can manage all the services with Azure Active Directory. So we'll talk in detail what does it mean. Any doubts so far, like the security and all? I know I'm talking more of theory, but you should remember all this terminology and how does it happens. Any doubts?
Purushottam, like we are providing roles to access certain Azure devices, right? That comes under Azure Active Directory, like read access, write access, and contributor roles.
Yes, that comes under RBS, okay, role-based access control. So if you remember that when I was creating a database, sorry, when I created this, what do you say? Azure Data Lake. Okay, in the Azure Data Lake, what I was doing, so while creating that service principal, I try to add some of the services, some of the users. Okay, I can add service principal, or I can add some of the users to access that particular resources. That is called RBS, role-based access control. Okay, you should know that role-based access controls. Okay. So within the role, within the any security or authentication method, so you should you should have understanding of shared access signature. So if you remember, while practicing our this one, what do you say, this sorry, Synapse Analytics, and while getting the data, while reading the data from serverless SQL pool. If you remember that, while creating the credential, I created with the help of shared access signature, right? So I mentioned that shared access signature is the key, and there I mentioned the key. With the help of that, I am able to connect to that particular ADLS and get the data out of it, right? So I should remember those kind of shared access key signatures and keys. Okay, so that is authorization, authentication. So what is authentication? I said to ensure that the person has enough access or the actual access to particular resources, right? So authentication will be done with the various methods within the Synapse. So we have Azure Active Directory. So as I was saying, Azure Active Directory is a directory services that allows you to centrally maintain objects that can be secured. The objects can be include user accounts and computer accounts. So I was saying, so with the help of Azure Active Directory, you can manage the access to all the services, and it centrally maintain objects. Okay, all the objects whatever we have that access. Okay, so it centrally manages. Okay, AAD. So usually AAD does not have any restriction. So once you have access to your portal, then you can access all the resources within that Azure. Now managed identity. What is managed identity? So it's a feature within the Azure Active Directory. It provides the Azure services with automatically managed identity in Azure AD. So whenever you create an whenever you create any resource, okay, there will be a managed identity will be added to that. Okay, so you can use managed identity to authenticate to any service that suppose Azure Service Directory authentication. Okay. So whenever you're creating any resources like Synapse Analytics and all, so managed identity will be by default will be attached to that. Okay, with the help of that also you can authenticate. Okay, so you have two types of managed identities. One is system defined, system assigned, and user assigned. Okay, so a system assigned managed entity is created for analytics whenever you create the workspace. So if you see here, like whenever you're creating like any resources, there will be a managed identity through which you can authenticate the access. If you see here, let me show. So here, if you see here, overview. Okay, so you have managed identity object. So this is a managed identity. With the help of managed identity also, you can access, you can authenticate the access. Okay, so like if you remember in the Azure Data Factory Synapse Analytics pipelines, when you create linked service, it talks about the managed identity as well. So through that, you can access that, you can authenticate the access. And we have, apart from that, we have something called service principal. If you remember that I was trying to mount the ADLS into Databricks with the service principal, right? So managed entity will be supported to some of the Azure resources only. So when the resource does not support managed entity, then we need to create service principal and manage it. Okay, sometimes the managed entity may not be available in all the resources. Okay, within the Azure, the managed entity is available only some set of resources. Okay, so when that is not available, then you can create the service principal and try to give the access to try to authenticate the resources. Okay, so while mounting this ADLS, what I was doing that I went to Azure Active Directory, right? And within the Azure Active Directory, what I've done, I created app registration, right? And within the app registration, so I created so using that app registration and secret, right? And I added that app registration or service principal as contributor to that ADLS, so that ADLS I can access that ADLS with the help of that service principal in my Databricks, right? So that's how you will be doing service principal. Now it is one is general thing, SQL authentication. So for user account that are not part of Azure Active Directory, then using SQL authentication will be an alternative. Say suppose you have the particular user is not available within the Azure Active Directory, then what happens? SQL authentication will be alternative. So suppose you are not part of my Azure account, so what I will do? So I will give you the access with the SQL authentication. You have only like username and password will be provided for you. Then you will be going ahead and try to access the resources, that SQL server. Like generally we were doing earlier, right? The same thing he was talking about. And multi-factor authentication. Synapse SQL supports connection from SQL Management Studio using Active Directory Universal Authentication, right? So instead of SQL authentication, okay, even you have multi-factor authentication also. When you connect to SQL Server, like when you connect to Synapse SQL or SQL Server from SSMS, right? When you click on the authentication method, so simply it will ask what is the authentication method you want to get. So if you see here, so yeah, I'm trying to connect to this one of the server. So here you can see authentication method, SQL Server authentication, and Azure Active Directory universally with MFA, multi-factor authentication. Okay, even multi-factor authentication also I can do. So what happens? Multi-factor authentication, I'll give the username, so my Azure username. So with that also, if I have access, I should be able to access that particular resources. Okay, that's about the multi-factor authentication.
So, Purushottam,
Mhm.
suppose multiple people are working on this same server.
Mhm.
So in that case, we are using this multi-factor authentication.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. That's how it happens. But usually what we do, we try to access with SQL authentication only in the real time. Whenever you have the access, we give the SQL authentication, and with the help of SQL authentication, that person will do, because sometimes you may not be have that multi-factor authentication. So we give SQL authentication with the help of which the person will access that. Right? And you have keys and shared access signature. If you remember that whenever you're creating that ADLS, you have keys. If you are unable to manage identity to access resources such as Azure Data Lake, then you can use storage account keys, right? So when you create a like credential, external data source, external credential, right? So you give keys by copying that from the keys formula, right? From the keys section. So that's talk of the keys. So with the help of keys, you can manage the authentication. And you have shared access signature. If external third-party application need to access to your data, you need secure their connection without using storage account keys. Okay. For untrusted clients, uses shared access signature. A shared access signature string that contains security token that can be attached to URL. So shared access signature basically tell a string, and you can attach to URL, and you can get the data out of it. Okay, so if you remember, I was trying to download the Contours data with the help of shared access signature. Okay, so with the data explorer, right, with the storage explorer, I can connect to any external ADLS account, okay, with the help of shared access signature key, and get the data out of it, right? So we saw this as well. We tried to connect to the external data source, external ADLS account with the help of shared access signature, and we could get authenticate, and we could download the data, right? So these are the some of the things which you should understand technically for authenticating the Synapse, right? So we've seen Azure Active Directory, that is by default, you don't have anything to do. So service principal we have seen while mounting the data, SQL authentication, and even shared access signature we did, and even keys we used when you try to create the external access and all, right? And we have key vault, it's a separate topic. We'll see how does it happens. Okay, that is about the authentication. Then what is authorization? Authorization talks about like once you have enough access to your data, resource, then what kind of data you should be able to access. That talks about the authorization in general terminology also, right? So we have column level security, row level security. Column level security in the sense you will have the access only to the particular columns, right? Row level security in the sense you should have the access only to particular rows, right? So what is column level security? Allows you to restrict column access in order to protect sensitive data. Okay, say suppose I have a database, okay, and a banking database, and I have some columns known as like SSN or Aadhaar number, or some what is a credit card number and all. Okay, and I don't want to give access to that particular data, that particular columns, then I can mention the column level security. Then row level security, it can help you to create a group membership or execution context in order to control not just column in database, but actually the rows. Say suppose you have some critical data within the bank, okay, and you want to give access only the particular users on those rows. Okay, say suppose you have various like what you say, various roles within the bank, I can say. Okay, you have administrator, you have general clerk, okay, you have salesman, I can say, you have executive. Okay, so always you just to make sure that you give read access only some particular users, okay, within the sales, like say suppose you don't want to give the access to salesman, but you want to give the access to admin. Okay, so that you can do with the help of the row level security, RLS. Okay, so here in the RLS, what you'll do, how do? You create a security policy. Okay, and with the help of the security policy, you will apply that security policy on particular table. Then only those users will have the access to row level security. Now the last thing is permission. Create, alter, drop the security policies. You would have alter any security policy permission. Okay. So once you have that role permission, like you can even create the security policy as well. In the sense like once you create the security policy, you can alter that security policy to give the permissions. Okay. So whether you want to give the permission for only for creating, or you want to give the permission for alter, or you want to give the permission for the drop. So you can give the permissions once you create the security policy as well. So you have column level security, low level security. So you know this, right? I don't need to tell. So even in the generally in the SQL terminology, grant select on this table, okay, these columns to this particular user. If you remember in the general SQL, what you do, grant select update on the particular table to the user you will give, right? You do it or not in the general SQL one? Hope everyone has done that by giving this access, by talking around access. Sudhakar?
Yeah, Purushottam. I mean, we never given access on column wise.
No, column wise we never give, but here this
Yeah.
is the feature we have. But
Yeah.
table wise you do that, right? This is
Yes.
only the extension. So instead of that table, apart from giving table, even you will give on the columns. That's that is the one of the advantage you have. So you can give the column level security. Okay, and apart from that, you can.
Can we create views in Azure? I mean, I think we can create, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's almost, it will have all the features embedded from the on-premise, right? So
Yeah,
there is no like separate thing.
I mean, we usually create views whoever want access only.
Yes, right. Yeah, I got what you're trying to say. Yeah, so you give the column level security even on top of the views also you can give. Yes, so of course the view is again a database object finally, right? So you can do that. Yeah, within the view I got what you're trying to say. Instead of the column level, you will try to replicate the same methodology by creating a view which selects only specified columns, and you give the permission on the view, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so here you have, apart from that, you have directly column level security as well. You can specify only the columns for the table, for the object, so the user will be able to access only those columns. And row level security. So a row level security, so I was saying that you need to create a security policy over here. So I create a security policy over, create security policy sales filter, and here you need to create a inline bind function. Okay, so what is inline bound function will do? It always returns a table. So when I say this policy, okay, here I'm trying to create a policy and adding a filter. So what happens? So whatever the data, whatever the like user I am passing this particular analyst one, okay, only that guy will have the access on that table. Okay, so I'll create the function. Okay, then I will create a security policy using that function. Then once it is done, okay, then I can give the access to only that particular user. So only on particular rows. So once I done this, when I see this, what happens? So only the CEO will have access on that particular data, right? So with like this, we can give the row level security. In the next session, we'll run through an example. We'll try to create a function, inline function, and we'll try to create a security policy, and we'll see how does that access happens. So, but basically you have column level security and row level security. Column level security, you can give the access only particular column, and row level security, you can control the access on the rows, okay, with the help of inline bound function, table function, and as well as the security policy. It's authorization, authentication. Okay, and you have dynamic data masking and TDE, transparent data encryption. So if you see that, let me share my screen. there will be some of the data, okay, for which you need to give access or which you need to secure the data. Only the designated user should be able to see the actual data, right? So then what you do, you'll mask the data in that case, okay? And also you will encrypt the data, right? So within the what happened? It's not giving. One second. Oh, sorry. I am seeing here Synapse Workspace. I should see in the dedicated SQL pool. So we have suppose I have SQL pool, dedicated SQL pool. So I can mask the data, even I can encrypt the data over here. So with the help of transparent data encryption in the security, we have transparent data encryption. So what happens? All the databases, backups and logs at rest without any change to your application, that will be encrypted by default. Okay, that will be encrypted by default. You don't need to worry about encrypting the data. Okay, so internally, like Azure will encrypt all the databases, backups, even logs also. Okay, that is the encryption at rest. Rest in the sense the data is there as it is. So it's not a moving data, right? We are not moving the data. So all the data which is at the rest, the Azure applies TDE, transparent data encryption, and it encrypts the data. Right? Apart from that, we have dynamic data masking, okay, through which you can mask the data. Okay, so you can create a mask, okay, and you can select the table and you can select the column and you can mask the data, right? So if you see that, yeah, so we have Azure SQL database and managed instance or Synapse Analytics supports dynamic data masking. It ensures limited data exposed to non-privileged such that they can't see it, right? So suppose you have email ID or you have credit card number, okay, you can mask that. Okay, you can create a mask on top of it, and only some users like admins only can see that. The general users, whoever accessed it, they cannot see that. Okay, it will hide all the sensitive data in a result set of a query that runs over designated database fields. However, the data in the database will not change. Of course, the database, so when you create a mask, the data will not be changing, but based on the user privilege, the user will be able to read the data, see the data based on his authorization. Okay, so if he has admin, you can see the data. If he's general user, you cannot see the mask data. But the actual data we are not changing, we are just creating a mask for that particular data. So I was saying users with administration privileges always excluded from masking and see the original data without any mask. So you will not be able to mask the data, but you can see the data, original data. Right? So from the dynamic data masking and TDE, you can expect at least 2 questions within the exam. So you should know the basics of data masking and all. And what is transparent data encryption? I was saying it protects Azure Synapse Analytics against threats from malicious offline activity by encrypting at rest. So somebody hacks the data, so the data is already encrypted. He will not be able to decrypt it. So TDE performs real-time encryption as well as the decryption of the database. Associated backups and logs also will be encrypted. So TDE encrypts the entire database storage using a symmetric key called database encrypt key. Okay, so whenever it encrypts the data, it uses a key called database encryption key. When you start up database, the encrypted database key is decrypted, when it then will be used for decrypting and re-encryption of the database files in the sequence of database engine. The DE key is protected by the transparent data key protection. So whenever you read the data, okay, so it will decrypt, then it will at the rest, it will again encrypt the data. So the all mechanism will be done with the help of the database encryption key DEK. Again, the DEK also will be protected with the help of the transparent data encryption protector. So these are the 2 things, dynamic data masking, TDE, you should remember. And if you going back to this particular Azure, so let me go back there. Yeah, so see here, I'll select the schema, I'll select the table, I select the column. Okay, so whenever I select the masking function, how 3 things I have. Okay, default value, credit card value, email, number, custom string. So these are the things you should remember from the exam point of view. So when I say credit card value, say suppose I'm trying to encrypt a credit card, I'll choose credit card. So what happens, all this data, like usually what happens when you get a statement, you'll see only last 4 digits, right? So the same way it will mask rest of the data by leaving 4 digits. Okay, so when I say email, when I apply email format, so what happens, say suppose I email column. So when I say that, only the first one will be visible, rest all will be encrypted. Unless you have an admin privilege, you cannot see that. Okay, number random range. So what happens when I say like 0 to 10, like 5. So what happens, so I have a numeric column. When I say number, okay, so when the user is viewing the data, he will be viewing the data only these numbers from 5 to 10. Randomly it will select, it will show only that data instead of the actual data, right? And custom string. So here also you say suppose you string format, string data, you can see, you can show only the custom string data to the user. And default value means like only the default value will be shown. Say suppose the date value is there, okay, and date value you're selecting the default value. The customer, or sorry, the user will see only 01011900 value. Okay, say suppose it's a numeric field and you are using the default value format, then you will see only 0 value. Okay, so based on the column value, you will have these things. Okay, so in the exam, you will ask that simple question. I will ask, say suppose you have a credit card value and you are masking that, then the vault value you will see. So we see that like this. Suppose the email value is selected, then what value you will see? You will see like this. Okay, so that's how the questions will be asked. So you can ask the masking data. You can add masking rules for columns based with the help of different methodology. Okay, that's about the dynamic data masking, which you should learn. Okay, so if you see here, dynamic data masking, see here. So here the schema is there. I don't have any columns, so that is the reason I did not select. But here, this is how it happens. And one more thing with the Synapse demo, I just forgot to pause it. 1 second, let me pause, because I want to use the same example for Monday. I don't want to recreate again. So that's how you create the dynamic data masking. And the last one will be Azure Key Vault, which is very important. And usually almost everywhere you'll use the Azure Key Vault. What is Vault? What is Vault? You know that, right? Vault is like your, what do you say? A wardrobe where you'll secure all your belongings securely, right? So the same way here also Vault, where you will secure all your keys, certificates, and all tokens in a secured manner. Okay, so it's a centralized cloud service for storing application secrets like encryption keys, certificates, server-side tokens. All these you can secure safely in the Azure Key Vault. Key Vault helps you to control your application secrets by keeping them in a single central location and provide secured access, permission control, and access logging. Even you can track the logging access, so who has accessed and all. Okay, and you can access you can control the permission. Only designated users will have the permissions to your Key Vault. Okay, so say suppose you have connection string and you want to access that connection string in your application, web application, or within the data factory, you want to access that. Then what you'll do, you'll create a secret for that. Okay, then you will make it safe. You will create the Key Vault. Within the Key Vault, you will create a secret, and within the secret, you will you will store that connection string. Then you will use that secret in the data factory or within your web application, wherever you wanted to do that. Okay, that's how you can secure all the keys, connection strings, and all. So there are 3 important concepts when you talk about the Key Vault: that a vault, key, and secret. So what is Vault? It helps to reduce the chance of accidental loss of security information by centralizing application security. Each Key Vault is a collection of cryptographic keys and cryptography protected data. Okay, so within the Key Vault, what you will do, you will secure all the protected data, something called secrets. So I was saying, say suppose connection string is there, you create a secret for connection string, then you will store in the vault. Okay, then the keys, the actual keys. Keys are the central access in the Azure Key Vault service. A given key in the Key Vault is a cryptographic asset destined for a particular use case. Okay, so it can be asymmetric key or symmetric key. So whenever you are accessing the data, so that key will help to get the data. And secret, so there is an actual secret which I was talking about. So secret are small data blocks protected by HMS generated key with the keyword. Secret exists to simplify the process of persistent sensitive settings that almost every application has. So storage account key, so SQL connection string, data encryption key. Say suppose within the data encryption, you can do Microsoft to provide Azure provided string key, or even you can provide user defined key. So instead of when you provide as user defined key, what happens? Azure encrypts the data with the user key. So that key also you can like you can manage that secret and put it in the vault. Okay, so basically it manages all your connection strings, keys, okay, in a secured manner with the help of secrets. That you should know that. Okay, at a high level you should know that. Okay, so in the next session we'll try to access a ADLS with a managed identity within the data factory. We'll try to connect to data, sorry, we'll try to connect to your SQL server with the connection string in the Key Vault. Okay, also we'll try to see how do we do row level security. Okay, we'll try to have some sample data, and I'll try to apply row level security with the help of this functions and security policy. That we will do for next session. And first off, I will do that, and we'll try to integrate even the Git functionality in the same example. Okay, so how do you create a branches and all, we'll see that. Then that will cover most of the part.